Hey guys, Bar Austin. We are all things Austin, Texas, from the born and raised perspective. And we've got on here a very special guest, Joe Nick Patowski. And we're going to kind of go in the in and outs of things. He's been here since the 70s and even early on than that. How long technically have you been here, Joe?
I moved in 1973, but I'd been coming to Austin since really the early 60s as a kid. So I've got a history.
There's a transformation in something of this town that it's never truly wanted, but it's already transformed and we're honestly just conforming to it. For those of you who don't know Joe, he's remembered on writing the autobiography of Willie Nelson called Willie Nelson, An Epic Life, and scoring together the documentary of Sir Doug and the genuine Texas Cosmic and Austin legend Doug Song. He's also totally entirely with the coordination with the Whitlift donors and the documentary for the archives of things for the You Know It Armadillo Rising music scene in the 1970s. He's written for people of Texas Monthly and worked with even Austin itself for the Chronicle, correct?
I've actually written for the Chronicle. I worked for the Statesman for a while back in the 70s for about a year and a half. I've worked just about every media platform there is in Central Texas.
Well, just give a quick little hello. I mean, you can give a wave, just show the presence of a podcast. Okay, we understand he's waving. Now, one thing I'd like kind of get into is you're kind of said to be the Gonzo of the history, the city of the Violet Crown, in which you brought to light all that collectiveness and weirdness and uniqueness about what Austin is and who it is today. Have you ever thought so many people are moving here today within the population level by how good your writing was?
You know what? I'll put it in perspective that in the 70s, once I moved, I started talking to all my friends that didn't live here, especially not just in Texas, but everywhere. Hey man, you ought to come here. It's cheap. It's easy. It's a wonderful lifestyle. And a lot of friends did move from New York and from San Francisco and Fort Worth, just places like that. So by the end of the 70s, that was like the first real spurt of growth that I saw. I started shutting up. And by the 80s, I was like, people, I want to move here. I said, you need to come back here in August and really, stay for a while and tell me how much you think you want to do it. So, it's all relative. But even in the late 70s, I thought, oh man, it's getting too crowded. And all I can say is, I'm a little more hesitant about, I don't honk the horn as far as like, hey, move to Austin. Now, I did write the book, Austin to ATX, and it was kind of a history of outsiders and alternative culture. And when you look at Austin today and take a snapshot, whatever it is, I mean, it's a big city, it's a city state, global importance, but the stamp is it's still an alternative city. It's still an outsider city, even though tech and money are more important now than they ever were before. It kind of messes with the creative spark. It's still a creative city, and people still come here for what I call the wrong reasons, which is they don't come for jobs or to get rich, although a lot of people do now, and that's kind of a bad thing. They come because this is the place where they can work out their ideas, and it still is a pretty opening, welcoming environment. The expense is an inhibitor, and it's chasing people away, but it's kind of like when I was working on that book, talking to Aaron Franklin of Franklin Barbecue. And Aaron's a little younger. He was talking about coming to Austin in the 90s and how easy it was for him in the 90s. And he was telling me this was about 4 years ago. He said, I couldn't do today what I did in the 90s. And we started talking about how much it changed and just since the 90s. And then, as you bring things through though, it's like, yeah, but it's still, where else are you going to go? It's still plenty cool. This is still it. And I've come to this theory, and I think it goes not just for Austin, but anywhere that people have come to find a place that they feel prideful about, ownership, a place where they want to be. Hey, this is my place. This is where I want to be. And if you ever get to a place like that, and I think for many people, Austin has been that place. They left somewhere else to come to Austin on purpose. But the minute you say, yeah, this is my place, you're screwed, because change is constant and it's never going to be that way again, the way you like it. There's always going to be changes coming. And That's anywhere. But what's happened in Austin the last 50 years is change happened at a hypersonic speed. And despite that change, and it's pretty, if you've been here 50 years, you put up with some changes. But despite those changes, um, it's still a creative city. It's a spark of it. So, that's where I try to, as an old fart, it's really easy to say it was better when I got here, and it was. But you know what? No matter if you just got here last week, it was better when you got here because change is constant.
Right. And I mean, I can speak, for that. And for Sean and I, we were both 85 myself and 86 for Sean. It was still a great childhood being raised in this beautiful city. And, it was still that just kind of at peace, letting yourself go. Parents didn't worry about you. And we're, always open to whoever it is, any new individual showing up from California, Washington. I don't care where you come from. But there's a particularness about always bringing, because they know how great and how beautiful this place is. Let me just bring a little bit of that Washington with me and try to really shove it down your throat. And it gets a bit of like, come on, man. We're Austin and we're the way we are. Can you just respect that, please?
Yeah, people bring their biases with them. And the thing is, if you move somewhere, I don't care where you move. It doesn't have to be just Austin. You move anywhere. And part of the deal is you need to be open and accommodating. And you've got to understand you're not in your old place. You're in your new place. You might bring in some good ideas, but it's like you don't show up in a place and say, well, where I come from, this is the way we do it and we do it right. It's like, that's bullshit. What are you doing here then? And so people that move to Austin generally, at least historically, I'd say have moved by choice. Now, what makes me nervous is since the tech boom in the 90s, this has been a really attractive job market. So there are a lot of people moving to Austin that they don't care where they are. They just want a job. And those are kind of the wrong people. That's not Austin. That's Houston. That's Dallas. That's anywhere else. And, it's still, you come here, you better adapt. And you better understand there's a local culture you are now part of. And there's a writer in Houston, John Novolomax, who a few years ago kind of called me and Eddie Wilson into a story. He was doing a story for the Houston Press. Austin's not cool anymore. And, he got Eddie and I kind of ragging, well, it's not as cool as it was, that's for sure. But, for Novolomax to say, well, Houston's cool now, or, people say, oh, South Oak Cliff in Dallas is cool. Yeah, they're cool in a way, but they're like subcultures. Austin, all of Austin is pretty much a subculture. And like I said, alternative runs the city. Even if you're a banker or a lawyer, you have to take a nod to music and to entertainment and to the arts because that's what makes Austin Austin. And if you ignore that, it's like you're going to get really pigeonholed. You're going to get ghettoized, and you might as well just go somewhere else. I mean, there are some values here that exist in this city that don't exist in anywhere else in this region. So, and you can say, well, yeah, there's some cities where it's like that. Austin's become a city state, and it really is. People talk about the hostile red sea, and Austin's a blue island, and that's kind of true. The rest of Texas exists around us, but that's oil Texas. That's the Texas that's built on extractive natural resources. Austin's been built on the creative mind. We don't pull any oil out of the ground here. We don't need that here. It's almost superfluous. And there's no other place in Texas that's of substance, a city where the creative mind powers the economy and defines the culture. That's us. And that basically creates Houston envy, envy from Dallas and Houston. People like John Novolomax, they don't understand why do these people walk around in Austin like they've got something going on. It's like we do know we've got something going on. Novolomax doesn't have Barton Springs. He's got Buffalo Bayou, and I'll take Barton Springs any day over Buffalo Bayou or the Trinity River up in Dallas. I mean, no one's going to jump in that.
Yeah, it's true.
To me, Austin's a lot more like Fort Worth than say Houston or Dallas, as far as I'm concerned.
Fort Worth is a lot like, to me, Fort Worth and San Antonio are the most Texan cities. And what's happening now in Fort Worth is it is kind of interesting. It's like I'm seeing some elements of hipsterism that never existed. I mean, there were always hip people in Fort Worth, but you got to lift up the rug to find the cool stuff in Fort Worth. But now the south side, the near south side, is a hopping part of town, and there's a lot of alternative energy there. There's cool kids have moved there, but it's still not the critical mass. They exist within this greater city. And what I'm saying is what started happening definitely in the 70s is cool kids took over parts of Austin to the point where they define the culture today. And the straights, we got a lot of straights, we got a lot of square people, we got a lot of Republicans, but you at least have to fake it and make like you like like you like music and you like creative arts if you're going to be, because otherwise you don't fit in.
Yep, it just confuses the population of, wait a minute, you like arts but you're Republican? That doesn't make sense.
That's suburbs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, going into the part of hipsters and everything, and this is my perspective, tell me on yours, but Austin alone for say South by and all of that taking off, and it was so ideal on the local hit for so long, and I'll never forget that. I almost see that it was like the 90s or so that we just kind of had this wave of people just coming in who just really weren't into music. And we're more to going from that divey bar to now sipping martinis.
In my book, Austin to ATX, Andy Langer gave me some good quotes. Who's a writer here in Austin. He arrived in 93, he said. So he said, I had a couple of years where it was still cool. And then the tech wave hit. And that kind of coincided with cigar bars and upscale joints in the warehouse district downtown and martinis, as you were saying. And Andy put it this way. He said, this was the first wave of young people that weren't into music. These were tech people. They're working 18-hour days. They don't have much time off, and they just want to get laid. They didn't want to hear any music. They just want to get laid. They want to cut to the chase. And it's depressing. And look, I think that those kind of people, the non-hipster, non-music, non-creatives, there are more of them than ever, percentage-wise and numerically in Austin. But they haven't gotten to the point where they overwhelm the creative culture. And I ended my book kind of ambiguously, and it's like, is this going to survive or not? And, I was looking at, can someone afford to be a creative in Austin? Yeah, if you hold 3 jobs. And you're really, you're pretty creative with your time, and you can still carve out free space and do what you want. Or you have to move to Lockhart now, or maybe San Marcos, somewhere else where you can afford to work out your ideas. Austin used to be that place. When I moved, it was of the 100 largest cities in the United States in the early 70s. Austin had the lowest cost of living of any of the 100 cities. So cheap rent, 99-cent 6-pack for beer if you were really desperate for cheap beer. Texas Pride went way beyond Natty Light or Bud Light or any of those beers. $10 for an ounce of pot. It was, standard Mexican weed, but you can find, Mexican weed anywhere. It was hard to find in Texas at the time. And there was quality, cheap weed. And then, of course, it didn't take long. Austin, unlike other cities in Texas, had quality weed, like being out in San Francisco or Los Angeles, and strains and stuff. And that was, I think, that woke up people like Willie Nelson real quick. Got Willie to quit drinking and being a drunk and got him to be a weed. There were all these elements in Austin then that don't exist now, but still kind of seeded whatever the culture is now. And I look at, things like the cost of living, can a creative come here? Is these are real serious matters if the continuum is going to persist, but it may not. This could become another big city, just another big city. It could be. It's already transcended a place like Kansas City, St. Louis, even Atlanta. Austin's got its own stamp, and it's got this vibe to it, and this kind of brand that's global and very attractive. People don't go to Atlanta to go on vacation, but that's been one of the things in the last 10, 15 years. People from not just the United States, but all over the world come to Austin on vacation, and they want to go, pose at Joe's coffee house by the spray painted "I love you so much." You go to the Stevie Ray statue. You go to the Cathedral of Junk if you're pretty creative and you know where to look. And if you just hit town and you don't know what to do, you go to Esther's Follies. I mean, these are things that just don't exist anywhere else. So, and then when you hit Barton Springs in the middle of summer, it's hot and you want to cool off. And if you can get in, it's not too crowded, all these ifs and caveats. Man, getting in Barton Springs and swimming the laps and looking up and you raise your head and you can see all these skyscrapers at the end of the pool. You're less than a mile from downtown. There's nowhere that has a Barton Springs except Austin. So it's important, even if you don't like cold water, don't like spring, or you only want a chlorinated pool or whatever, you got to pretend these things are important because these are elements that make Austin unique, separated from everywhere else. And as long as locals get it and understand these are things worth protecting, we're going to be okay. But when you have so many locals that could be in anywhere, any town, USA, then you got problems. So far, the good people are outnumbering the bad people.
Yeah, for sure they are. And Austin will always be the place that in November you can go to Barton Springs and it's 90 degrees outside.
I have swum every month of the year there. And when I lived in the city, I'm out in Wimberley now. But when I lived in the city, I would go out of my way and like, it got to be a daily habit. I have to swim a mile a day. I got addicted. Now I live off the Blanco River. So during the warm months, I'm in the Blanco. If it's a nice day, 70 in January or February, I'll drive up to Austin and go swim in Barton Springs.
That is some fine hill country out there. That's some of my favorite, just in that area alone, like Wimberley.
Well, this is what's important to understand about Austin too. It's in this geographic center, and there's all these different Texases that come to our doorstep where we're facing the coastal plains. We're a couple hours from the coast, 3 hours drive maximum. Blackland Farm, great farming is just east of Austin. But, we're also kind of on the northern fringe of the Tamaulipan thorn forest. We're on the eastern kind of extremes of the Chihuahuan Desert. We got the hill country at our doorstep. And I'll tell you what, growing up in Fort Worth, Fort Worth's a great place to come from, but it's not pretty like Austin. I've never seen a city in Texas that had the kind of beauty that Austin did when I was a kid. And that certainly attracted me. The water is that's a major element of why I'm here and I remain here. You start thinking about going somewhere else, it's like, they got water like this? No.
Exactly. And that's the problem about people moving here is they start going, well, there's 20, 30 something water holes here. Why am I leaving?
Yeah, well, that's the idea. And I'm a big swimmer. So it's like, in Fort Worth, there was Burgers Lake, which was an alleged spring-fed lake. And it was kind of a pee hole. It was chlorinated. It had none of the aesthetic values of a real spring-fed swimming hole. I get down here. My wife, my girlfriend at the time, was the one that taught me into Barton Springs, and I was the sissy at first. Oh, it's so cold, and I can't swim across the Whit. And then I got hooked. And so that one reason I live where I do in Wimberley is I wanted to be near a swimming hole, and I couldn't afford to move to Barton Springs anymore. So I'm in a good place. It's not Barton, but it's pretty close. And this is all part of the same area. This is, I'm 46 miles from downtown, but my city is Austin, and I'm in the Austin metropolitan area.
Right. It's all been pushed out that far. Exactly.
People like me are moving out this way, making all the Peckerwoods and rednecks nervous.
Yeah. Driving y'all out because it's a bit different. I'm talking about that. The rent is so high and just so astronomical today. But, going back on just things about, I know you probably get irritated yourself enough about, here he goes again. He's going to talk to me about the Armadillo headquarters.
No.
Who would you say was probably the most iconic musician you saw that wasn't the most name recognized person?
Oh, boy, that's a hard one because really, there's so much of my musical education I got at the Armadillo just because they had, it wasn't so much local acts, and there were some good local acts, but just the amount of road acts and the curation of road acts. In 1971, I was working at FM underground radio station in Arlington, Dallas, Fort Worth. And I was kind of ticked because I kept seeing, hey, Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band, Flying Burrito Brothers, all these really good music acts, music that I was playing on the radio. But these bands would come to Texas and they would play nowhere else in Texas but the Armadillo. So in the fall of '71, I went one Saturday morning. I drove down to the Armadillo, and I met Jim Franklin, and he showed me his boa constrictor snake. And I finally figured out Eddie Wilson was more in charge of this place than most of the rest of the hippies there. And I met him, and I kind of got my first exposure to, what the place was about. And then when I moved in '73, look, I hit a lot of different clubs, and Soap Creek and Split Rail were really regular hangouts for me. But Armadillo is where you saw the bands. And so, seeing Van Morrison when he was just starting to peak, Leonard Skinner was the loudest concert I've ever heard, even outblasting the Who at the Summit in Houston. I mean, my ears hurt, and I probably lost a few dBs off of that show alone. I didn't like him that much, but Old and New Dreams, which was this jazz quartet, these were all players that played behind the experimental saxophonist Ornette Coleman in the 1950s. And Ornette was no longer there, but these guys were, he was in New York. These guys were touring, just kind of playing his music. So it was like Don Cherry getting to meet Dewey Redman, the saxophonist, who was from Fort Worth, and getting him telling me some stories about the R&B scene in Fort Worth in the 40s and the early 50s was just like enlightening. That was a great show, but I'm thinking, first time I saw the Ramones, first time they toured, first time the Clash played, Talking Heads. So I mean, these are like, name your poison. Seeing Mance Lipscomb with Bill Neely in Taj Mahal. That was one of the weird couplings that Taj Mahal had taken after Mance Lipscomb's music. Mance Lipscomb was an East Texas country blues player. So it's just like, what did you want to see? I learned so much by what I saw, and it's just like, it was these were all mind-blowing performances, pretty much. So it was you get spoiled just by what was coming there and the things that you saw, and I miss it terribly. But what the Armadillo did, despite all its financial problems and struggles, I mean, at the end of its run in 1979 and 80, it was profitable and making money. But you had a landlord, M.K. Haig, who basically was an asshole. And he decided, well, I'm calling in the lease. And he shut him down. Armadillo probably would have gone another 10, 15 years. But you could tell that even in 1975. It's like 70, 75. It was like, it was the summer of love, but delayed because news always travels slow in Texas. So hippies didn't come on full on in Texas and in Austin until the early 70s. But by the mid 70s, you started having real estate value increasing. So you had a new breed of asshole, which was the real estate, the land flipper, realtors. And these were like people that were getting rich quick. These were the kind of people that were drawn when cocaine showed up. And to me, this was like part of Austin that was like, the idealism was tempered by these people showing up. So real estate and these people that thought that they were real brilliant just because they could flip a piece of land. They could buy it at a price, hold on to it for a few months or years, sell it, and get rich. And they thought they were geniuses. And it just kind of brought in the wrong kind of person. But that was kind of, to me, the first wave of the wrong kind of people that showed up. And there's always been, there is an element there, but I've never found them to the point where they overwhelm the city and kill the spirit of what the city is. But realtors changed it, and realtors took down the Armadillo World Headquarters.
How did you and Eddie meet?
Well, like I said, I met Eddie in '71 when I came down from KFAD radio in Arlington to go check it out. And so when I moved with the specific idea. I'm moving. I was up in Minneapolis running a great record store, still there, the Electric Fetus. Been there 52 years. But I'm homesick and it's cold up there. So I came back, but Fort Worth was not home anymore. Something was happening in Austin. And so I moved to Austin in '73 with this idea in my mind. I'm going to write about music. and there's a scene here and it's happening. So early on, I moved in August. Uh, by October, I'm interviewing Willie Nelson. I'm interviewing Doug Som, who's one of my role models, who I moved to Austin to see at Soap Creek Saloon. And I'm already interfacing with people like Eddie at the Armadillo. And certainly when I worked at the Statesman in 77 into 78, part of 79, and I'd already worked for the Austin Sun. I'd done some work for them. Eddie, I'd go to Eddie and Eddie, what's new? What do you got going on? And Eddie was the one that turned me on to Ozium, this spray that, we go into his office and he's always smoking this pot. And, Eddie, like Doug Som, these guys had weed that was like, this is not weed that I saw on the street much. It was always high quality. So you go in to do an interview or get some information, you come out like trying to get your mind together. But so Eddie turned me on to Ozium too, that whenever we leave his office, he'd spray it. So theoretically people wouldn't smell the smell, which was bullshit. But all through the 70s, I mean, it was the Armadillo. By 75. I started adding, I was a Soap Creeker to go see Doug Som. That's where all the great club acts were. I mean, first time I saw Joe Ely, Delbert McClinton, Professor Longhair, Augie Myers, Doug Som, all those cats. Alvin Crow was at Soap Creek. And then there was a split rail, which was never a cover charge. And I saw some great bands there, and it was just a great hang. But then 75, Antone's opens up. And I start hanging out right next door. Is a record shop called OK Records. This is on 6th and Brazos downtown. Downtown, 6th Street is dead. It's the remnants of the old segregation Main Street. Because during segregation, Congress Avenue was for white folks, and 6th Street was for people of color. If you were black, you frequented the businesses on the north side of 6th Street. If you were brown, you frequented the business on the south side. And at night, it was pretty dead. College kids from UT did not go down there. Clifford Antone was a pioneer, and he opened up a blues club in an old furniture store. My friend Leon Eagleson opened up a record store right next door. Another guy from Southeast Texas opened up a Cajun food place, Mama's Money, 2 doors down. And there was a Shine Parlor and a porno bookstore. That was a great block. So I'd go hang at Leon's store during the day, and then go to Antone's at night. And you're hearing the greatest blues acts that were breathing there. And you also saw the young bands that Clifford was nurturing, like the Fabulous Thunderbirds and the Cobras, which were Stevie Vaughan's, the band Stevie was playing at the time. All these bands were nurtured, and that's basically Clifford set up a school. So you'd hear these great, legendary bands, and he would keep some of the players like the great Hubert Sumlin, who played guitar with Howlin' Wolf, or Luther Tucker, a guitarist. These guys, he would keep them around town for during the week, and they'd stay around for 2 or 3 weeks. And so, weekdays you'd be hanging out at OK Records and maybe going in the back and smoking weed, or going out east of town to go eat catfish with big Walter Horton. And these people were just, so it wasn't you just heard them play, but you saw how these guys lived and acted. So it was pretty amazing to look at the school. So the 70s was just like, it was a kid in a candy shop with all this different music, and it was all coming your way. At the center was the Armadillo, but there were all these other places too. And, it was like, name your poison, whatever kind of music you wanted. If there was live music that toured, you got to see it in Austin. You got to be exposed to it. And OK Records, this little record shop. I sold Bob Dylan a record there once. Leon had left the store, and Bob Dylan and his Rolling Thunder Review were staying at the Driscoll Hotel. I was alone in the record shop, minding the store, and here comes Bob Dylan popping in. I'm writing for Rolling Stone, and I'm a stringer, and I'm following this tour. And I put in a request for Dylan to interview him, which I knew wasn't going to happen. He wasn't talking to anyone. But here he comes into the record shop, and we're alone, and I'm watching him. What's he buying? What's he looking at? And he was looking at some Buddy Holly stuff. He bought a Frank Zappa record, Weasels Rip My Flesh. He bought a best of Eric Clapton record. He was going to buy more, and he's having a good time because this is old used records, and there were 78s even. This is right in Bob's wheelhouse. And then a kid comes into the store, a wide-eyed space cadet is all I can describe him as. And he recognizes Dylan immediately. And he walks right up to him. I've got this idea and you can help save the world or whatever. And you could tell this is Dylan's life. And he kind of went, oh man, come on, get out of here. I'm not, no. And he puts it into his wallet, pays me and gets the hell out of there. This guy didn't really have, he couldn't be, he couldn't be alone or be on the streets anymore. So, this was Austin in the 70s and I was stringing for Rolling Stone. I started writing for Texas Monthly in 1975, brand new magazine, and kind of carved out a niche as a music critic there for them. And I did all this through the 70s and got to be such a wise ass that I quit writing in right around late 1979, even though I had many opportunities and I was doing a lot of freelance. I quit writing to manage a band. All this music's around here. And my girlfriend started playing with this guy that I'd met, Joe King Carrasco. And it was more out of protection. My girlfriend, I didn't want her to get screwed around. She had no business in this business. And I kept telling her, here's what you do, and here's how you do it, because I knew how the business worked. So I thought, well, this doesn't take rocket science. So I quit my day job, and I managed Joe King Carrasco and the Crowns for 5 years. Band did pretty well. Got them on Saturday Night Live, several record deals, multiple tours in Europe, tour in South America. My girlfriend, I married her on a bridge, we married on a bridge in Paris on tour, eloping from a tour. All very cool. She got pregnant, so she's getting off the road. My days are going to end, and I went to Greg Curtis, who I'd known at Texas Monthly, and he'd become the editor. And I said, Greg, Chris is pregnant. I need a job. And he tried me out on a couple stories and hired me as a staff writer at Texas Monthly. I kept my little toe in the business by managing another band called True Believers, who were part of the New Sincerity movement in Austin in the mid-'80s, a band consisting, 3 guitarists, John D. Graham, Alejandro Escobedo, Javier Escobedo, and they were pretty great, wicked band. They should have been Guns N' Roses. I managed them through a couple albums when everything went south. But, I think Alejandro and John D. in particular have done pretty well. They're still working in Austin and kind of made a name for themselves. And after doing the band bit, though, I really, I remember in New York a lot or Los Angeles, I had Joe King, and all of a sudden, people that had opened their door to me were asking me, well, who else you have? And it's like, well, I just got this one band. No, in this business, you're supposed to have 2 acts. And then I started thinking about who I'm supposed to emulate if I'm going to be a good manager. And managers in general, band managers, music managers, entertainment managers, as a whole, as a stereotype, they're pretty creepy, greasy people. I didn't want to be that person. And I got tired of getting 7 people up and on the road every day. Greg hired me at Texas Monthly, and I went back to writing, and I've been writing pretty much ever since.
It's funny you said it that way, actually, because I've never really put it out there on the actual of it, but you're right, it is.
When I got my job at KFAD in Fort Worth, I remember it was great because all I had to do is play advertisements at certain times, and then huge record library, play good music. That's your job. But the program director, Phil Cook, reminded me, he said, listen, you just need to remember, this is the lowest form of show business there is. It's like, what? He said, radio is the lowest form of show business. And then there's music, and then there's TV, and then the real sharks, they're all in movies. And it really is thus that when you, by managing bands, I got, it's not just music anymore. It's the business of music. And it's, it's full of carnies and hustlers and people that are willing to pull the rug out from under you. It's not a very legitimate business. It's a cash business. So you get a lot of sketchy people involved. So, I had to remember, I learned that firsthand. But yet there were different degrees. And this is, you mentioned the Armadillo. And the Armadillo kind of became famous, it hosted Willie Nelson, and the hippies and the rednecks laid down together and discovered a common love of country music, weed, and beer. And yeah, this is all true. But the Willie affair with the Armadillo did not last. It lasted to the first Willie Nelson picnic, which the Armadillo helped co-promote. And then it fell apart. And it was mainly because Willie's people were old school music people. And coming from the country music field, all of Willie's people carried guns, mainly because the only way you could settle up at the end of a gig, you know, you didn't call your lawyer. There were no lawyers involved. You pulled out your gun and put it on the table. The gig owner pulled out their gun, and then you settled up. And if you didn't have a gun, you're going to get screwed. Well, the Armadillos was basically a collective of hippies. And they didn't like seeing Willie's greaseball people waving around guns backstage and acting crazy. Of course, you know, country guys, they like speed and pills. The hippies were all about pot and maybe acid. You know, it was peace and love. So there was a subcultural clash, and they broke up. And then took his business over to the Texas Opry House over by on Academy right off of South Congress, and started a whole nother thing there. And there was still this sense that, you know, the hippies and the rednecks, as an audience they got put on together, but, you know, as far as doing business together, there was some tension there, and it was just ways of enforcing. Now I'm old enough now to really realize and recognize why these guys carried guns, and it was the only way you could get paid. You know, back in the 60s, if you're out on the road doing road work, that's how Willie survived. That's why he hired his drummer, Paul English. Paul was the enforcer, and you didn't mess with Paul. And you started seeing it in music organizations. Every organization had a Paul, or wished they had a Paul. And so music was not all peace and love and flowers, but it's a pretty dirty business. But it's one that I respect. And if you play by the rules, you know, you can succeed in it. But, you know, that business we're talking about basically collapsed in the 90s with the advent of the digital era and online music. Basically, you know, we have Pandora and all that. We can get music for next to free. It's changed the way it is. But with South by Southwest.
But I mean, with it, there was still a wave that pushed in the 90s for the really still beginning portions of South by. But then it was probably about 2007, 2008 when MTV and X Games and everything started coming here. It just went way too mainstream, and now it's just stuck on that mainstream. And how do we get back to giving more to the local talent?
Well, you know what? I think how we get back to it is we're here. COVID-19 is, you know, all of a sudden it's not cool to go out. All of a sudden it's not cool hanging in clubs. All of a sudden it's not cool cruising 6th Street. Now, you know, you wonder, is this the end of all that? I don't know, but what has happened is there's been a pulling back, and which is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm friends with the guys that started South by Southwest, and they started basically to get as a way to get bands, indie bands in Texas. How do you connect with the industry? New York and LA. Well, you know, in the 90s, all that went away. The music business and contracts, you know, $250,000 contracts, all that's gone. But you know what? Ever since then, there have been more bands applying every year at South by Southwest. The music business might not be there, but music as a creative force is more popular than ever. And maybe it's gone back to more of an amateurism. But what South by Southwest did basically was create the Austin brand. I hate this term branding, but it basically commodified.
Austin is a brand in itself.
I know, but it commodified Austin so that you say South by Southwest in New York or in London or in LA, and people nod knowingly now. Oh yeah, Austin. And I remember someone in LA told me, yeah, I looked at Austin real hard in the 90s, but it just didn't have critical mass. And I didn't move till the early 2000s when it had the mass. It's like, you know, that critical mass is what started ruining it, guy. But it has become a brand. And in my book, I kind of, where I avoided that, this whole idea of branding, at the end, I started talking about the brand of Austin, Whole Foods Market, bought by the biggest retailer in the United States, Amazon. Started in Austin, #1 organic retailer in the world. But that's a brand. And, you know, I knew Stubb. I used to go eat at his joint in Lubbock before he moved to Austin. And we were friends. I remember when Stubb was starting to sell his barbecue sauce door to door. He was broke. He wasn't making any money. That I mentioned in here that Stubb, which had been bought by investors and been commodified. Stubbs barbecue sauce sold to McCormick, what was it, 3 or 4 years ago, for $100 million. That's branding. That's commodification. That's not a good thing. I still buy it at the store, but that's not stub the guy on you. So the branding part, take it for whatever it is. I don't buy into the Austin brand. I get what it represents, which is something cool, alternative, outside, and definitely independent. Indie spirit is still driving our culture and drives our restaurants, our businesses, even though, the brands, the chains and all that are moving in here. And to me, those are they're evil forces, but you don't have to buy them. You don't have to go to those places. So, why get excited about In-N-Out Burger when you've got P. Terry's? Why eat Rudy's Barbecue when you've got that's been an interesting development since the 90s. And it really was when John Mueller of Louis Miller's Barbecue and Taylor, the grandson of the founder of some of the best barbecue in the world, got kicked out for running off with the family help and leaving his wife and children. And he landed in Austin. And in the 90s, he opened up a place on Manor Road, which basically started the modern barbecue revival. I mean, Aaron Franklin actually worked for John Mueller for a while before he opened up his trailer. But, now, why bother with driving to Lockhart or Luling or Taylor? Because the best barbecue in the world is in Austin, Texas right now. And so this crusty old tradition that seemed like it was just stuck in its ways, the hipsters took it over and have reinvented it. They're still very traditional. But, that's where some of this progress is a good thing. And it's not just barbecue. I mean, Austin is an incredible eating town, and it's edgy, and it's got its own kind of style to it that separates it from any other city, any other region of the country. There is kind of an Austin cuisine and an Austin style to that, and it transcends barbecue, and that's pretty cool. I like that.
And it wasn't always that. It was more Fort Worth, Dallas had that kind of like restaurant scene and everything, and I mean it's something that's really, I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, kind of come of age lately.
That is Sean. It's a big change to me, and that's more like a '90s shift. And I think Austin is on a equal footing in many respects with Dallas and Houston as far as food. It's much better eating. Look, in the '70s, there was Tex-Mex, and there was great Tex-Mex, and there was some barbecue that was okay. But I always point to a place called Vicashmo's, which was on West 6th Street. It was Italian and Mexican. You were happy to get both. There weren't many choices here in Austin. There was not a whole lot of edgy dining at all. But I think in my Austin ATX book, I started mentioning things like Alana's on East 6th Street, which kind of glorified the chicken fried steak. Threadgill's, when it opened, was radical. And it was the first Austin-themed restaurant in Austin. And this idea of the Southern cuisine was interesting. These were new ideas. No one was doing that. But really, the 90s is when the chef-driven restaurants started coming in. And today, I think, Austin is on par with just about any global city. In fact, when I go to New York now or LA, it's like, unless there's a specific place or two that I want to eat, I'm not real turned on. It's like, I got just as much in Austin to eat. I can eat the world in Austin. So what are you doing? I mean, this is so good. So that's where Austin has grown up as it's grown as a city. It has become more global and more of the self-contained city-state. It's not provincial. It's not as funky as it used to be. Funk costs now. And you got to pay a groove tax. I hate the groove tax. Parking, like that. But again, I'll go with Aaron Franklin. It's like, it's still plenty cool. Where else are you going to go?
Yeah. Valentina's is always pretty great to me.
Well, that's just it. You know what? I wasn't hip to Valentina's until when I was interviewing Aaron one morning before he goes to work. He was wearing a Valentina's t-shirt. And I go to Valentina's, and it's like, oh, okay, I get this. And they have the Franklin taco there. The brisket, they've got an item named after Aaron. So I thought, this is what it's all about. These aren't competitors. These are people that are exchanging ideas and
do a great already in Austin. Yeah.
Yeah. And Valentina's is like carved out a niche. No one is doing that Mexican edge to their barbecue like they are. It's Tex-Mex barbecue, man. And so you know, we can sit here and bitch about what we've lost, and loss when you get to be an old fart like me is kind of continual. But I'm more like, show me something new. I've got I have two sons, both who were born in Austin. One's in Oregon now. The other one works on a ranch in Wimberley, but he and his girlfriend they're the ones that turned me on to all the great places to eat in Austin. So they took us to Pitchfork Pretty. They told us all about Suerte, and it's like, I'm kind of like, where have I been? I'm kind of a slow adapter, but there's plenty of cool. And I gotta say, as Austin has become expensive, a lot of Austin cool has spread out. So there is Lockhart is much more fun to visit than it was 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And there's a joint not far from where I live, out on Ranch Road 32. The Devil's Backbone Tavern has been kind of reinvented by new management. You got Robin Ludwig, one of the Robinson family from Bandera, and Abbey Road, who has the Copeland Inn and has had a bunch of joints. Well, they're bringing in acts in this old place that I wouldn't hang it. I didn't hang out much at the Devil's Backbone because it's an old codger place and full of cigarette smokers. And they made the smokers go outside, and they've reopened the old dance hall there. And I tell you what, I'm back at Soap Creek Saloon in the 1970s. It's got the same vibe, a lot of similar music, a lot of roots and country music, and I'm still where I was 45 years ago. I'm a little bit farther out. I'm not in the city center. Soap Creek Saloon was in Westlake Hills, and back in the 70s, that was out of town. Now you got to drive a lot to get out of town.
Is Westlake myself. Went to high school there, and I never actually went to Soap Creek Saloon, only because I wasn't old enough by being born in 85. But you constantly hear from the older generation of, if only you could have just experienced Soap Creek Saloon. So yes, I always wish I could have been part of it, but I always heard the stories.
Yeah, it's in the middle of an office park. I went and found it. I was interviewing Phil Mazzetti for that Doug Somm film, and he's got an audio studio there. And I've started looking around, and we kind of pinpointed it. There's no mark or anything, but it's funny because so much of that area has been developed up. But it was so cool because you were out in the country, and it was a quarter mile off the highway, down a dirt road. So once you were there, you could do whatever you wanted. And if someone's going to come after you, try to bust you, you were going to know about it. And it was just it was the clubhouse. Armadillo was the concert hall, but for a handful of people, Soap Creek was the clubhouse you went to afterwards. And I gotta say, that's to find a place today, not far from where I live, even though I'm way out of town, that has that same vibe. You can't keep, the Austin brand. I'm a little bit dubious about the Austin vibe. Is it exists and it persists, and when you find it, it's just like it's so reassuring, and I don't know, I get all warm and fuzzy, but it's around here. And sometimes it's just you got to be in the right place at the right time, or it's just pulling over at the side of the road, like at a bridge crossing over a river, and you pull over and you see, hey man, it's a good swimming hole there. Someone brings a 6-pack, someone brings something else and all of a sudden you're having a party. That's who we are. And downtown Austin, it's going to Schultz's Garden. The oldest business in town is a beer joint. That's pretty important. So you go to the oldest business in town, you drink beer and you talk, you converse. I mean, this is a fine art, you might hear a band. And if it's a real good, particular afternoon in June, and it's just, you all might be in coat and ties and looking across the table at each other, let's blow this off and let's go to Barton. I mean, you can't do this anywhere else. And here you're empowered, you're encouraged to do that. And even if no one really is a slacker anymore, you've at least got to pretend the fine art of how to slack. You got to try to slack.
And I like the way you put that, where it's just that it's kind of moved to a different place. That's definitely, my family moved out to Round Rock in 95 from Austin, and there was nothing in Round Rock. And then now I go out to my parents, and it's like, there's everything. There's an H-E-B, there's a bank, there's an apartment complex, and it was a cornfield around their house.
Yeah. The growth So if you lived there when there was a cornfield, you might not like the changes to see surrounded, but on the other hand, there's all these other amenities. And I mean, when I look at, I try to stay away from politics. Culture defines who we are. But when I look at politics, Williamston and Hayes County, the adjoining counties to Travis County, they turned blue in 2018. I mean, they flipped from where they were going. I don't know if that's going to hold or not, but it's like, people hipsters that can't afford Austin are all of a sudden your neighbor in the subdivision wherever you live. And that's going to change the nature of your subdivision. So I kind of like the spread of ideas and the spread of Austinism. And of course, if you want to go to the extreme of that, go out to Marfa, because Marfa is Austin's small town. And I've seen the evolution there from in the early 90s. It was the town that belonged to this minimalist sculptor, Don Judd. And basically there was not much going on.
How many people were out there at that point?
The population has really not changed. 2000, about the same. It's landlocked by ranches, but it was sleepy. There was no commerce anymore since the Army Fort had folded up in the late 50s. All the commerce moved over to Alpine, and Judd just bought it up. It was cheap, and he bought the old Army place, and he made the Chinati Foundation for permanent place for his art. But he didn't like people, so if you're a friend of his, you were invited and you could go party with them. But there was nothing to do if you went to Marfa. And then after Judd died, you had lawyers from Houston starting buying up property. And two of them in particular, Dick DeGuerin, probably the best defense attorney in the United States, bought a place. And this guy, Tim Crowley, along with his wife, Lynn. Tim is probably the biggest mover and shaker in Marfa, now owns the St. George Hotel and many properties. But what they did was bring in galleries and kind of businesses, and they started buying up a lot of things. But even then, in the early 2000s, it was still an art town. And I remember running into Dan Keene, who worked at the Big Bend Sentinel. He just graduated from Columbia University, and I met him at Ray's bar with Robert Halpern, who edits the Big Bend Sentinel. He's a friend of mine. And Dan said, he knew my work, and he said, man, I'm so sick of these art openings, these Houston people. Tell these awesome people to start coming. And I didn't tell anyone, but sure enough, they came. And today, Marfa is less of an art town than it's an Austin cool kids town. And there are all these cool kids there, still the same population. But a lot of them work at the radio station. A lot of them are there for just a few months doing their art project or whatever. But there's a lot of music. There's a lot of hipsterism there, to the point that so many people were showing up at Liz Lambert's El Cosmico for their Festival of Peace and Love. Liz is the owner of and founder of the Hotel San Jose. Well, Liz kind of brought Austin people out to Marfa at El Cosmico. So the sheriff put a bumper sticker on the back of his pickup. In fact, they started sticking them on cars that showed up at El Cosmico. Keep Austin there. And some people didn't like seeing the Austin influence, but I think it's made Marfa a whole lot cooler than it was. And it's always a very interesting place and full of a lot of old Austin people.
I like that one. So it's keep Austin there, you said?
Yeah.
I like that one. That's pretty good. It's just so simplistic and to the point.
Yeah.
Have you talked to Eddie since the closing of his Thread Gills?
Yeah. I waited when I heard it closed. I waited, I think, 4 or 5 days. Pardon?
It was just so shocking.
Well, it was shocking and it wasn't shocking. When I saw the announcement, I waited almost a week. And when I talked to him, he said, yeah, all I've been doing is talking to people on the phone. I said, well, that's why I didn't call you. It was going to come at some point. But I thought he had kind of circled the wagons around the old store. He got in the Austin Museum of Popular Culture, moving in the back. His wife, Sandra, had come back on the scene and was managing the place. But COVID took him down, I guess. It was too much.
Turn of events, different times, yeah.
Not that it wouldn't have happened. Eddie's had health issues, and I wouldn't have been surprised if it would have closed quietly a couple of years from now. But the virus hastened the end, and I think he didn't want to end it. He didn't want to give it up, but this is a good time to cut it off. So he had to cut it off.
Has he sold the building, or has he?
The fate of the building and the back building where the Austin Museum of Popular Culture relocated is up in the air. I think what he indicated to me when I talked to him was his dream would be that the Health Alliance for Music and Musicians in Austin, HAM, would buy the building and preserve some of the innards. But he's also making plans now to auction off whatever fixtures are in the interior. He did a huge auction about 3 years ago, and over $500,000 was generated from his auction. But he didn't take anything out of the original store. So I don't know what's going to happen. That building's not going to get knocked down. I'll put it that way. But is it going to be repurposed? Is it going to be? He had an opportunity a few years ago. One of these hospitality groups, the folks that own have bought El Arroyo, and I don't know if it's the same people that bought Deep Eddy. They bought a lot of iconic locations. People have bought Cisco's, and some folks made a run at Eddie. We want to buy your store and take it over, but he just wasn't seeing it. And I don't know if someone would sweep along now to do the same. I don't know. Is there value in the brand? The brand? Why are you even talking brands? I don't know. You should get Eddie on here and ask him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a hard man to get a hold of, but yeah, I'd love to.
He's got a little more time to spare now, though, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
You talked about that, just that things had changed, like, with Armadillo and everything, and like there were all those hubs. You had Armadillo, and then you had Antone's, and like, what would you say? Is there a hub now? There's nothing comparable really to those times.
If we can accept the virus, which has closed down these places, and I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, I would say up till
about the virus shock. Talk about different time eras.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's just I guess right before the virus. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I mean, but it's
going to change after that.
Austin's got a bunch of music subcultures now. It's not as monolithic as it was in the 70s when, back then it was progressive country was the thing. By the end of the 70s, every music tribe that exists is represented. But I mean, I'm looking at, like, to me, the cool roots kids, they're at the White House, and there's pretty cool bands that kind of are bubbling up there. For me, if people of certain age that like just roots music and the Austrian tradition, certainly Continental Club, the Continental Lounge, and then if you want to drill really down, Sea Boys, because those are all Steve Wertheimer's clubs.
Those pretty hard, yeah.
Steve's got very good taste, but what is important about Sea Boys is it's kind of like his personal club, but it's the residencies there. So, probably one of the biggest bands in Austin right now would be Black Pumas. And Adrian Casada and Eric Burton did a residency for several months, getting their business together at Sea Boys. So if you knew which day it was and what time you could go there. I've been partial to Wednesday in the early evenings to go watch John X. Reed, who's a survivor. John was one of the first people I saw in the 70s. He was the guitarist with Frida and the Fire Dogs, Marcia Ball's band at the Split Rail. And they were the first country rock fusion band that I saw, progressive country. John leads a stone country band on Wednesday evenings there early. And what's cool about it is Denny Freeman, who's the guitarist who came down, he's a blues guitarist, came down the wave in the 70s from Dallas. He was Stevie Ray's mentor in the 70s. He was the elder guitarist in the Cobras. Stevie was the second guitarist. Denny's played with everybody. He played with Bob Dylan for a while. He played with Taj Mahal. He toured with him. And he's been back in town for 15 years or so. Denny took up pedal steel guitar, which he's never played before. And I should say, he took up steel guitar, lap steel, not even pedal steel. So they're doing like a 40s or 50s vintage country music at Sea Boys. It's just, it's off the wall and off the charts. So I love going there to see that. I tell you, Monday it's at at the Continental Gallery with Elias Hanslanger and Dr. James Polk on B3. James Polk has been part of the East Austin African American blues scene going back to the 1950s. He played with Ray Charles's band, and then he was a professor at Texas State for a long time. Dude plays B3 on Monday nights. You know, you might have to pay $5 to get in to go see a master of the B3. It doesn't happen anywhere else, and it's just casual. So those are clubs I'm looking at. The New Antones, if you like music and you like blues, it's not just, you know, the headliners it's the afternoon shows they're doing. But I'm really partial to now Waterloo Records and Antone's Records have live music all the time. And it's free. You just go show up at the right time.
Steve Earle's showing up all the time, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, you want to see someone, and you know, these are people that you're going to have to fight tooth and nail to get a ticket. And can you afford a $50 ticket to see them in a club? Well, they're just paying free here. They want you to buy beer if you're going to drink beer there.
We're actually having John Coons on here pretty shortly.
John is an important architect of whatever Austin's music scene is today. And the fact that Waterloo is that great indie record shop that has persevered over the years. But
it's unfortunately being pushed out of Austin now too. Out of that Lamar location is finally on the fritz of going away. And it's just it's unfortunate to listen to that.
John was the first tenant on that intersection. You know, when they moved they were on South Lamar, just across the river, and they moved up there. And there was, you know, they moved in at the same time as Waterloo Ice House. There was no Whole Foods Market across the street. There was no book people and all those things. And, you know, early on, book people joined forces with John to basically, you know, seize the logo that Red Wassenich came up with, keep Austin weird, and promote independent businesses. So he has been in the middle of it since the beginning. But I got to make my personal testimony that shortly after Waterloo opened, John Coons and his partner Lewis Cart came up to me because I managed this band, True Believers. They love True Believers, and they said, "What can we do to help?" And I was trying to get them a record deal. They basically loaned the band the money to record an album, so I can go sell the album, which eventually Rounder and EMI bought. And I had to ask John later. I said, "John, I forgot about that. But did we pay you back?" He said, "Oh yeah, we paid you back in full." Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that. But you know, a record shop loaning a band money to make an album, this is crazy. This is not any business model is going to recommend. This is crazy. This is stupid. This is doing things for the wrong reasons. Just like in 1970, Eddie Wilson discovers this empty building in the National Armory, gets his friends together, 10 friends. Let's start a concert hall. There was no business plan. Or, you know, these guys at KLRU, we got a new studio. We need to fill it up. Hey, let's do music. There was no master plan. The coolest part of everything about Austin, Liz Lambert didn't say, "Let's revive South Congress now that Steve Wertheimer has opened up the Continental Club. Let me go open this hotel." It's like, no, you know, I'd like to redo this motel. You know, I'm done redoing my house. I want to do something else. There was no master plan, but what Liz did started the whole redo of South Congress to the point you couldn't start a Continental Club today. You couldn't start a Hotel San Jose because the neighborhood is so successful, it's priced all the indie businesses out. And so where the indie businesses go, well, they're on Fort View and Manchac now. And you hit it. So this is constant. And it's basically, you know, it's hipsters discovering neighborhoods, redoing them, reinventing them, and then other people move in and make them so successful that the people that started it they have to move out and go somewhere else. But that's okay because they're coming out my way now, and they're making my neighborhood cooler than it was before. That's the Austin groove. That's the Austin funk or soul. That's not the Austin brand.
It's its own uniqueness, and that weirdness is still there, but it's ever so accepting across the entire nation that weird is everywhere now, and which is not quite weird anymore, other than it's funny. You see the occasional of coming to an ACL show, and somebody's wearing some random weird purple socks. You could literally ask someone about that. And you go, why are you wearing those purple socks? Oh, because I came to Austin. And it's just funny to find a group like that still. And it's just, okay, you're giving us a lot more clarity with this, or just a lot more hype that we're so unique. But
Maybe that's a billboard for people from farther away. It used to be in Texas, if you were different, this is where you came. You were tolerated. It's the university, you can fit in here. And I think that's that attitude. Yeah, if you wear purple socks and you're living in Floydada, maybe you're tired of getting stared at. And you move to Austin and you find out, oh, people aren't even giving me a second look. Maybe I better go a little, nutty or crazy or something. It's this is a tolerant place, and it always has been. University has made it that, just by the nature of this being a capital city, and by being in Texas, we've got fourth and fifth generation people, and some people may, I'm old 300. This is a transient place, and basically, your nativeness depends on you just declaring, I just got here. I'm an Austinite. And this is one of the few places, it's like, no one's going to check your card to see how many generations back you go. That doesn't rate. If you're fifth generation Austinite, it's like, so what do you bring to the table, dude? And that's, but if you're different, you thought you were different when you grew up in El Paso, but you've come here and you just go, maybe I'm not so different. This is a pretty good place. It's good to know there's a place like that. I remember Kirk Watson was mayor of Austin in the 90s. And he used to come on the radio when I would join Kevin Connor on KGSR in the morning. And I remember once, and he was doing his spiel, and then we went to commercial break. And we're talking off the air, and he said, I can't say this on the air. This was the 90s, it was dated. He said, but, tolerance and diversity, that's what makes Austin, Austin. And he was really speaking at that time about, we're open to gay people that are different, that are not fitting in, that's what makes us appealing. And a community like that means we can get the best and the brightest of a lot of different people. We're not going to be exclusionary. Now, some of these tight ass places, you got to be a certain kind, or we want all these certain people. You're not going to get the best and brightest anymore. And that's Austin's, that reputation exists, and it's weird how that's been institutionalized. It's one thing to be walking on 6th and Congress and showing my sons that guy across the street with great legs wearing a Speedo and pushing a golf cart. Yeah, that's Leslie. And now to see statues to Leslie or documentary films to Leslie, Leslie doesn't exist anymore. Just as weird to look at Stevie's statue. I mean, I knew him as a person. And he was kind of a mess as a person, but he's a really good guitarist.
I truly love Leslie. I mean, I used to go downtown to try to seek him out. And every time I did, he would just have the most outrageous, turn your head, just break that big smile. And he always point his finger at me. I got you to smile. There was something about that guy. It was just, you couldn't put your finger on it too. Why am I just keep seeking you out?
I remember one night, this was somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. on 6th Street. And it's streets jam-packed. This must have been during South by Southwest, because I generally don't go down there. But right next to the king of 6th Street, the guy with the crown that played the guitar with the fuzz tone, Jerry Van King, I think was his name. He was the king of 6th Street. Right next to him was Leslie with a kind of a sparkling top and manically playing maracas. And I'm just seeing with this man playing maracas, keeping the beat with the king of 6th Street. And I thought, nowhere else. And it was a beautiful, but that's, it's those moments and those people. But again, it says Leslie's dead. Leslie has been institutionalized, statues and documentaries. So is it still the same thing? I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just weird when I see what I knew as living things become something that's just memorialized. So I've been working real hard with another kind of icon like Leslie is Crazy Carl Hickerson, who used to sell flowers outside of Esther's Follies. But before then, he ran for city council a bunch. And he always ran in the 70s on a pro weed ticket, which was crazy. You know, what are you going to do? But he was so successful that there was a bumper sticker around town. I'm crazy too, Carl. I'm crazy too. So we're all crazy. Carl has been dying for the last year. I think his last party was in July. And he's been in hospice since. But I went and visited him back in early February. He's popping up on Facebook and Instagram, and he still does things. But I just want to keep in touch as long as I can, because I can see him. He is now passing on to this institutionalized. He's going to be this frozen image. People are going to know this character, and yet he's actually a real person. So I want to try to keep as much in touch with the real people before they fade. But they're going away. Red Wassenich, the guy that came up with Keep Austin Weird, he passed a few months ago. And so I'm glad I got him in the book, because in the book, this was about 5 years ago, he's telling me I had to revise my book on Keep Austin Weird because so many of the places that were weird are gone now. But, Red said, but there's a lot more, there's new weird places and new weird people and new weird things. So that spirit persists. Just that we're not too straight and too conventional and too buttoned down and mainstream. We're not too Austin branded, and we're more Austin soul. If we keep our eyes on that and attention to that, we're gonna be okay.
Absolutely. The only place you can be where you wear a collared button down and wear a tutu with purple socks, and you're just being asked the same, hey, you want to open this business over here, do this, do that. The business conversation still goes on, right?
No, you can always compliment the person on their fashion coordination.
You could, hoping that their colors match, right?
More Austin if they don't.
Yeah, clashing is important.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I really appreciate it, Joe. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate having you on the Bar Austin today.
All right, well, let's do it again sometime. And thank you for representing Bar Austin and representing Austin. Glad to be here.
Hey, cheers, man. You have a good one? Hook 'em. That's it, man. Hook 'em all day. Cheers. Good talking to you.
All right, take care. Thanks. Adios.